Earlier today, a U.S. senator revealed that he had recently been buying stock in Alibaba. What does this potentially mean for Alibaba shareholders? And what does this broadly mean for Chinese stocks in general if you start seeing U.S. legislators buying stock in Chinese companies? If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Daniel, and you're watching Unrivaled Investing, a no-hype mission-focused channel trying to find you exceptional companies and unrivaled investments. In full disclosure, this is not financial advice, and at the time of this video publication, I did own stock in Alibaba. I actually own the Hong Kong shares, which I bought using Interactive Brokers as my platform. So earlier today, Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama filed his regulatory financial disclosure revealing that he purchased around $150,000 to $250,000. There were several purchases, but also a partial sale. So it's a ballpark figure of a couple $100,000 in Alibaba stock in the middle of December when the stock was in the 120s. There are some claims that it was a financial advisor that had done this, but he actually has a history of buying Alibaba stock. And there is some sort of concerns that it was, here it is in the CNBC article relating to how it was revealed in July as having violated a federal financial transparency law in terms of failing to file a disclosure within 130 days of making a purchase. So you have, or excuse me, within a 45-day deadline. So, you do have this sort of aspect to it. But this is the latest news from, Senator Tommy Tuberville buying stock in Alibaba. And there's some perceived hypocrisy here, as in May 2021, he introduced legislation called Prohibit TSP Investment in Chinese Companies, which would prevent thrift saving plans, predominantly U.S. government retirement funds utilized by the military and federal civilian employees, to invest in any entity based in the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. And so that definitely, I can imagine that rubbing a lot of folks the wrong way, effectively saying, hey, you're going to prevent other folks from being able to invest in Chinese companies, but you yourself don't have that problem. Okay, so what does all this potentially mean for, Alibaba? I'll skip the usual plug. If this is your first time tuning in, though, I would appreciate you hitting that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But the reality is that Senator Tuberville is not alone, as in the past year, several other congressmen bought stock or options in Alibaba. This includes Representative Moore from Utah, Rep. Gottheimer from New Jersey, Rep. Langvin from Rhode Island, Rep. Cisneros of California. And you could see all this data well aggregated at the website app.capitaltrades.com. I'll leave a link to this site and the other source sites, so the source documents where you can look up individual representatives, senators, to see what's actually been publicly filed because of the legislation forcing them to. And so you could, I'll leave the links for that in case you want to do some of your own sleuthing. But it is really interesting to see that over time there's actually been several buyers over the last few years. So what does all this mean, though, seeing all these actual legislator buying of Alibaba stock? It does raise some questions, like, could this also imply that the risks of a mass Chinese stock delisting from the U.S. exchanges is overblown? Is it all that these folks all have financial advisors that then, that have put them in debt? And they didn't choose to do it. This was just, it was by accident that they got it. Or does this reflect that there might be a warming between U.S. and Chinese relations? It's, it does sort of beg that question of, do they know something that the average citizen doesn't know? And does it mean that the fear and concerns about Chinese equities broadly might be lower if you see the U.S. legislators actively buying stock, as you could see, once again, by going capital trades? It's not, mind-blowing amounts of money. It's not like tens of millions of dollars that you see sloshing around. But relative to individual wealth, you see a couple $100,000 that does, raise some questions. Does that lower the odds of, let's say, future legislative penalties tied to Chinese stocks? It's an open question mark, because I would think if you see broad buying in Chinese equities by various different legislators, wouldn't that lower the risk of future penalties, sort of from the perspective that they have some exposure there? Personally, I have very mixed feelings on legislators being able to trade in and out of stocks. I don't like the perceptions of potential conflicts of interest, even if the trades are made by financial advisors that are independent from them or in the name of a spouse or a family member. That said, I think stock ownership is one of the core blocks to building wealth. And I wouldn't want legislators making rules when they themselves don't have skin in the game. So it's a double-edged sword, because I'd want legislators having skin in the game, saying, hey, how do we make sure we grow the pie and folks can get wealthy over time? You don't want legislators not having any ownership in stocks and then taxing the heck out of it, for example. What thoughts do you have on this matter? Should congressmen be prohibited from trading stocks? I'd definitely love to hear your take, just because it is sort of a murky field that you go into where you start wondering, like, is there inside information? Personally, I look at this and I don't think it has a huge, impact on Alibaba stock. I don't think it's one big vote of confidence. I don't think there's a very special insight there looking on Alibaba or Chinese stocks in general. I think it's very possible that you have some enterprising legislators that say, hey, I just want to buy some of this stock. And, regardless of whether or not it leads to good outcomes or they have a good track record, I just think you have a lot of folks that are buying it for themselves. I haven't done the analysis of saying, oh man, this legislator has an excellent track record of performing. So that's I think probably the next steps, if you think it warrants to look into it. But that starts going down a rabbit hole that I'm not so sure I'd personally want to. It starts getting a little too skeezy for me. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think there should just be outright ban? Like in the past, you had legislators that effectively said, hey, I'm going to sell all my holdings when I come to office. Now it's, oh, you have to file when you've done a trade and you can buy and sell and that sort of behavior. So I'm very curious what your thoughts are. So please make a point of hitting that thumbs up and hit subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much.